Welcome to People Potential with Amanda. Thank you for listening in today. I'm your host, Amanda Fleising, and I'll be bringing on various experts to discuss empowering individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of People Potential with Amanda. Today's guest is Joseph Anderson, the CHRL, and he's the Director of Talent Development at Canopy Growth Corporation. Hi, Joe, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, my pleasure. Thank you.
So, Joe, I'm thrilled to have you on as a talent development expert, and you have such a depth of experience in HR and different facets, but a lot of teaching, developing others, and it seems like you have this deep passion for coaching, helping others, helping develop their talent and bring out their full potential. And that's why you were such a natural guest for this podcast. So, Joe, can you please tell me a little bit about yourself, share a bit of your professional journey and experience, and
Sure.
perhaps one thing that people should know about you?
Okay. No, thank you. I think like a lot of people coming out of university, I wasn't super clear on how to apply my degree. It seemed like a good idea coming out of high school, but then I don't know, just life took me in a bit of a different direction. And so I got my start at actually one of the big five banks in Canada. And as I look back on nearly 15 years working there, it was such a gift because I had the opportunity to step into management. I had the opportunity to manage teams across a variety of different, geographies and functional areas, lots of change management experience, and then found my way into human resources, partly because I had great leaders who were giving me feedback and direction that sort of steered me in that direction. And I think having had the leadership experience and the cross-functional experience, it gave me a lot more confidence stepping into human resources because suddenly I had my own people management experiences and stories to tell others. And I could relate to what it's like to be in their shoes, right? Since then, I've worked at a few other organizations, and I've sort of taken my focus a little more towards talent development and talent management. That's really the area of human resources where I think I'm most passionate about and I get the most fulfillment from as well. And so, as you mentioned in the intro, I've recently joined Canopy Growth Corporation as their Director of Talent Development and Talent Management, and here I am.
That's very exciting. And I mean, your passion for talent really shines through for talent development and talent management. So let's just clarify, what is talent development to you? Because it could have so many different definitions.
Yeah. And I'm gonna come at this maybe in a slightly different way. I'm gonna start with what I think it isn't. And so what I think talent development is not is a once a year exercise where, I and my leader fill out a template about what I want to accomplish in the coming year and obsess over the template and getting it done by a certain due date, and then not talking about it again for the next 12 months. That is not at all what talent development is, should be. Talent development, in my view, is very multifaceted, right? It includes, elements of coaching, right? So just ongoing feedback from people that you report to or that you trust as a sponsor or a mentor. It includes thinking about where you want to go and how you want to grow, whether it's upskilling in your current profession, reskilling if maybe the kind of work you've traditionally done needs to change because of automation or just changes in the marketplace, or progressing upwards if that is of interest to you. But getting really clear on what are the what are the new roles and responsibilities that progressed role might include, and then starting to practice and get exposure and experience to that early on. So talent development, I think, includes a lot of, thinking about what's uniquely important to you from a career and skill growth perspective, and then coming up with targeted actions or plans that are going to support you in gaining competence, confidence, credibility in some cases.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
was going to ask you what some of the best practices are, but I think you just named them. And you did start with an excellent point, and I was smiling because I do recognize that many companies do that. And so I've definitely seen it before, that once a year obsession over the template and filling in your development plan and then looking at it, if you're lucky, at the mid-year point, and then again at the end of the year. So then the responsibility is fully on the employee or your talent to, okay, remember, like, keep that top of mind. Here were my development goals, and then I'm in charge of it. And you have to have someone that's like very proactive to do that. Or is it the manager that will keep checking in on that? So there's that continuous element is really missing in those guidelines. So the practices that you mentioned, like, should really help propulse that and give more clarity of, like, what's that process that will enable success.
And it's not like, I'm not dismissing the importance of some process, right? And I think organizations that put a lot of emphasis on the template, the point in time of the year where that needs to happen, I think in a lot of cases they're looking to get started, and they're trying to just get some foundations in place. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I had a leader recently who, would often, with folks that she was working with, emphasize that the process is important, but the quality of the conversation and the uniqueness of the development path is ultimately what matters the most, right? And so working with people managers, for example, to help them learn, how to have quality development conversations is really important. And also, helping folks understand that there's value for sure in like that formal education type of development. In some cases that's going to make a lot of sense. Like, if I'm just thinking of an example off the top of my head, but if I don't know, writing in plain language becomes really important for me because of my audience, then maybe going on a plain language communications course is a good idea. But like, how do we supplement that with finding some opportunities in my day job to take complicated policy, for example, and rewriting that in plain language, and then getting feedback on how did that go, and did it land better with the audience because of that application of what I learned in that course. So again, I think process has its place, but it's a byproduct of a great conversation or great conversations, and plans that are specific to the individual. And then I guess the other thing I would just say around this when I think about talent development is there's so many ways to work it into other aspects of day-to-day life at work. So a great example would be objective setting or goal setting, depending on what your company calls it. But that's typically something that happens at the beginning of a fiscal year. And the emphasis tends to be on setting goals and objectives that are business related. And then what you often see is companies will then have a development sort of process that is decoupled from that. Why not bring it together? I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about goals and objectives. One of your goals and objectives should be your growth and your development. So work that into the process, work that into the conversation, work it into the template if you have one. Don't worry about having it be a standalone exercise. You can accomplish a lot of different things in one great conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, luckily our template does involve both of those aspects. So we have a little check, one win, but absolutely each conversation and each development plan has to be unique because every person is so unique. What motivates them? What are their priorities? So I love that aspect of it. So Joe, we just talked about talent development, and then how do we move into a more specific area that is often discussed? I see it all over LinkedIn. I see articles after article on leadership development because
Mhm.
that's a whole other skill from being an independent or individual contributor to when
Yeah.
you become a people manager, a leader, and you have to develop yourself and then you have to be there for your team and help develop them. So, how do you develop those leaders, and what's your take on leadership development versus general talent development?
Mhm. Uh, Another great question, and something that um, maybe I might struggle a little bit to answer this in a concise way. So keep me keep me honest and keep me on point. But one of the things that first comes to mind is the definition of leader. So again, I would encourage individuals and organizations to think about leadership a bit more broadly than maybe do you formally have direct reports? Like certainly that makes for a leader, in the traditional sense, but there's so many roles in today's workforce where leadership is implied. So project managers, right? You're leading through influence all the time. You're not
True.
necessarily getting things. You're not necessarily doing a lot of the work or following through on the tasks, but you're inspiring and influencing a really diverse group of people to try and row that boat in the same direction, right? And so the first thing I would just sort of stop and think about is, um, does it make sense to only include formal people leaders in that scope of leadership development? I've worked at organizations that have a broader definition to what is a leader, and they'll engage and encourage folks to participate in that kind of development or programming if they're aspiring leaders or if they lead through influence, right?
That's really interesting, and a really interesting perspective. And I like the project management example there because I
Yeah.
can totally see that aligning. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? A leadership development program would be so beneficial for
Mhm.
a project manager, even if they might not have direct reports.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like another great example of a role might be like a facilitator of training, right? Yes, like you're helping people learn about something new, different, practicing it, all that good stuff. But how you present and how you show up and how you answer questions and lean into participants that are maybe having a hard time staying focused, that's leadership, right? And so leadership development is applicable to you as well. The thing about leadership as well that I also think about, and it's just sort of this anecdote, but I had a team at one point in my career. Um, Man, they taught me a lot. Like I gained so much from that particular experience. And when I left, I took a new role. My going away gift was a really nice leather um, like tote bag. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, this is almost like a representation of what it's like to be a leader, because at the end of the day, you go home with your own priorities, wins, and challenges, but you're carrying with you like the responsibility for other people's wins, challenges, priorities, right? So you have that extra layer of accountability and ownership and responsibility. So for me, leadership development is about helping individuals recognize the the, just the broader scope of what they're responsible and accountable for, helping them really appreciate that people look to them all the time for like signs and signals of how they should act and operate, right? So you're role modeling, you're on stage all the time. And is that stressful and is there added pressure? Yes. But is it also an opportunity to help individuals learn how to deal with stressful situations or communicate a complicated scenario through your role modeling? Absolutely. So to me, leadership development is around things like soft skills, or human skills is kind of the term that you're seeing more often than soft skills, because the term soft kind of implies that they're less important, and they're not.
Yeah.
It's about how you act and behave and sort of flex in the moment. That's how I would describe leadership development, which is a little bit, there's just some nuances, there's some differences there.
Absolutely. And then how do you get the best ROI for those leadership development initiatives? So I know, HR is trying to bring, in general, we're trying to bring more of a strategic perspective and have our voice at the table. And we know that, having those quantitative stats to back these initiatives. So to say, these leadership development initiatives will deliver these results. And then how do you get that maximum impact across the leaders
Mhm.
of your company? So you might have all different types of leaders, and so how do you do that
Yeah,
as a professional?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there are definitely certain types of talent development programs where you could easily measure, not easily, but more easily measure return on investment. I'm thinking about, perhaps there's a traditional way of training new call center reps, and then you refresh the program and you start to measure things like, accuracy rates, or yeah, like there's just more tangible metrics that you may be able to look at to see, did it pay off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And different
Um,
roles allow for different levels of measuring, right?
yeah,
Because
and,
like,
and
is it a
leadership
sales
development,
role or not?
that's right. Leadership development, you don't tend to have as many quantifiable metrics. Um, there are some ways to look for lifts or shifts. One would be, if your organization does regular engagement surveying, or more often than not, companies now are doing like pulse checks. The key is to ask the same sorts of questions to your audience more than once, right? You can use assessments as well to measure change over time. So like a 360 assessment. Let's suppose that you want to invest in your leaders. One of the ways you can get clear on where the biggest common areas of opportunity are is to engage that audience in 360s. You can collate or sort of aggregate, where are the areas of common strength, where are the areas of most opportunity. You target your programming towards the area of greatest need. You reassess through a 360 in a year or 18 months. And again, aggregate, but you're looking to see, are there some lifts in terms of how people are perceiving that leader's behavior, right? And if the answer is yes, well, then you've got a return on investment.
Absolutely. And I can't stress the importance enough of measuring regularly. So you
Mm,
measure before a new initiative, you measure during, you measure after, so that you
yeah,
can see what's that lift.
yeah,
And this is constantly the data that I personally am striving to find with our own clients at Success Finder. And just to make sure you measure before,
mhm,
measure before we start, so that we have that starting point and we can see the progression. And it's the same in marketing. We're obsessed with measuring
mm,
with data points, what are our KPIs, and so that we can see the progression and optimize. That's why I'm always asking for that in the HR context, and when building case studies. But if we could have one takeaway from my my ask or my suggestions for HR leaders, would be to
mhm.
just measure more, so then you can optimize, and we can see the difference that your work makes and that these initiatives really make.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the challenges in HR is being data driven. Um, and the thing with leadership development and being asked to assess the return on investment is doing just that often requires a bit of an investment,
Yeah.
right? It's easier to pick a topic, rally people together for like a half a day, deliver a program, and then walk away and hope that, people are forever changed. That's a lot easier than doing some upfront assessment to see what actually is the biggest need. And let's make sure that we're addressing the real need versus the imagined need. And then doing some follow through or follow up to see um, how is whatever people learned or socialized being applied, and how are the employees' perceptions changing based on that leader's impact, effectiveness, influence. And again, there's lots of different ways you can do that. You can do that through engagement surveying. You can do that through 360s. You can have leaders even just self-assess themselves before and after. Is there a little bit of bias in that? Sure. But that's where you can engage others in that assessment as well.
Absolutely. And this brings me to my point about assessments. So we're talking about, to have successful programs like this, I imagine there would be some coaching, whether it's from their managers or an internal coach or an external coach coming in. And so
Yeah.
then what role do assessments play in that coachee, internal, external, whatever type of coach it is, but in that experience?
Mm-hmm. So assessments are a hot topic because there's often confusion around what is the assessment really assessing, right? And I know with the emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, um, there's some there are some individuals that question whether assessments are helping or hindering that effort. And I think that's a valid concern, but I think what it brings us to is then get clear on what the assessment needs are and identify an assessment that is going to accomplish those specific needs. If you're looking to simply help a team orient and work maybe a bit more effectively together, then perhaps a simpler assessment that might put people into groupings of behavior or style, that might solve that particular need. But if you're looking to dig deep and really understand someone's particular preferences and how that might work for them and also hinder them from being as effective as they can be in their current job or the next level position, then you want something that is going to really dig deep, right? And be highly reliable and valid in terms of the science behind the assessment. Assessments aren't intended to typecast people. And so again, I think that whenever DE&I comes up, it's important to understand that without assessments, you are actually opening the door to more subjectivity and bias because you're once again relying on human beings to make judgments about people. So if you do your homework and you identify an assessment that checks those boxes in terms of statistical relevance and validity, mitigates bias, and Success Finder checks all those boxes, then you can be assured that the insights you're getting are actually grounded and will help you and others really understand who someone is and where their opportunities for growth lie.
Absolutely. I mean, we're very passionate about that at Success Finder, and I'll give a quick plug to my very first ever podcast episode, which was with my colleague, VP of Product and R&D, Carolyn Haas, and she goes over what are psychometric assessments and how to evaluate the quality of an assessment. So she gives, concise, precise measurements and what you should really be looking for in an assessment. So just quick plug to that.
Yeah.
If you want to, if any of our listeners want to learn more about psychometric assessments, that's a great episode to listen to.
Mhm. The other thing about assessments I'll just kind of raise is that, again, oftentimes organizations are looking to use them to assess what they're calling culture fit. And I understand the meaning behind that terminology. I think there's good intentions there. What most organizations really mean, though, when they're throwing that term around, is they're looking for culture. They're looking for fit in terms of this person is likely going to align with our values, right? But what they don't mean, or what I'm hoping they don't mean, is, and they're going to look, sound, act exactly like everyone else here, right? That's not great. So I think assessments can help you identify culture complement, where you can see that someone, or you can explore whether someone is likely to feel engaged and that the values will complement their own. But you can also identify traits or behaviors that they lean into really heavily that are going to round out a team that's perhaps more homogenous than they could be.
It's really interesting that you bring this topic up because we've been having a lot of back and forth over the last few weeks regarding our culture tool. And we've really moved away from the word fit as well, because we offer at Success Finder a culture benchmark, which is a custom benchmark with a specific company. So looking at two ways. So there's top down, looking at what are your values, and those have to be real values that come from the company, represent the people, but there's an aspirational part to that. There's like, who are we looking to be? And then measuring bottom up, who are we really? What's coming out from the data? Having assessed the pool of talent, what's coming out? And then where do those two meet? But it's not just the intersection, it's the whole thing of like, what's the aspirational, what's the reality, so that when you're looking at this, and we're moving to calling it culture impact, because how does that new person impact the culture? Do they help pull you towards your aspirations, where we don't have, let's say our aspiration is to be more creative, like it really within our values, we have creativity, but we're missing, it's not coming out enough in the data and the people we have now, but that's where we want to move to. And it's really important for our strategic objectives. Well, then we can look at our new people that we're recruiting, helping us move towards that objective, and they're adding that. And you just have, everything is much more data backed or data driven, where you can see what is someone adding, where are they complementing, how will they work in a team, how will they fit, or how will they feel or contribute overall to the culture, and looking at it from that lens of behaviors. So it's been a lot of really interesting conversations, and we landed at, it's really a culture impact where you can assess versus the current population, and how can anyone help drive those aspirations, so towards our values, towards our aspirational culture.
Yeah. One last, comment around assessments, and I think a suggestion that I would make to, anyone who's tasked with talent management, talent development, org effectiveness, is think about the use case for the assessment or the assessments that your organization is leveraging, and try to identify an assessment that has multiple applications, right? So the same assessment that you might use to assess the culture impact and the preferences of candidates for a critical role, if it's a reliable, valid assessment, then that data, is will stand the test of time. So why not use that insight then to create a tailored onboarding plan, Why not use that insight as the leader to really understand what are the ways that I can offer constructive feedback to this individual that will appeal to their motivators and not put them under threat. Use that same data to drive team effectiveness. If you have others on your team that have done the same assessment, contrast, compare, see how you can get these folks to understand each other better and work more collectively and collaboratively together. And then use the data again for like talent reviews or succession planning to once again drive development in ways that are targeted and meaningful for the individual and the path or destination that they're on.
Joe, I don't know if you've been spying on our internal meetings, the changes to our presentations, but we've absolutely at Success Finder been along that line where, reuse the data. So it's strategic talent, data and insights reusable throughout the employee journey. So at all those touch points, leverage the data and add data to your decisions, to those team alignment exercises. So I know my team is particularly looking forward to, we have a marketing team alignment coming up in September where we're working with our HR team to each get our debriefs again and then work as a team to see what are our collective strengths, collective perhaps areas of development, who can you count on for what, and having that deep understanding of your colleagues, your team. And we make a whole activity out of it. So I know we're really, really looking forward to that particular step.
Talk about return on investment. If you're trying to make a case in your organization to bring in a psychometric assessment, for example, and the current state is you have one, but it's very niche in terms of its use case, or you currently use a number for different applications. If you can identify one that you can repurpose across a number of different use cases, like I don't know many executives who wouldn't be open and interested to consolidating, costs under one umbrella. So, I mean, yeah, there's again, this is another way I think that HR professionals can use data to drive their talent agenda, build a business case. Yeah.
Awesome. So Joe, let's wrap it up with my final signature question. So how do you unlock your potential?
I think I'm one of those individuals who does crave feedback, but I'll be honest, I'm also prone to personalizing it. So on the one hand, I want constructive feedback. On the other hand, I take it to heart. And so what I continue to try and do is encourage others to be frank and open with me about where I could refine, improve, be better. But then I'm working on myself in terms of understanding that, okay, I gave these people permission to give me feedback, so I should expect it. And B, the intent is not to be malicious, right? So I need to try and park the personalization and think about what's the spirit in which this was intended, and how can I go about showing these folks that I'm not just open to the feedback, but I intend to do something about it. I wouldn't say that I'm like overly formal about it, but I do have a number of people in my network, folks that I've worked with in the past who are, inspiring as a mentor or, certified coaches. And from time to time, I will reach out to them and just say, like, can we just have a conversation? I need a different perspective. I need advice or an ear from someone who's less emotionally or personally involved in this situation. Can you help me? I find that to be really, really powerful. The other way that I think, I try to unlock my potential is by helping others unlock theirs. I've learned a lot about myself by investing in other people's development. Some of what I've learned hasn't been pretty. Like I've learned that I take too much on. I've learned that I tend to take too much ownership on behalf of other people because I want them to be successful. But I've also learned a lot of new ways of thinking, working, and you always feel good when you see someone shift, change, become more confident or competent because of your involvement in their development. So as much as it takes time and effort and energy, I do find that there's almost always some sort of return, payback benefit to you as well, just by seeing someone else and kind of learning through their own learning. So I think I lean into that too.
Absolutely. The more you give, the more you get kind of perspective without going overboard and with having, your personal guardrails and boundaries. And that first example, I've heard other people refer to it as a personal advisory board of people that you can count on and reach out to. And those are so important to have and to help you put things in perspective, especially if you care so deeply about your work and your professionalism and you take so much responsibility. So having that outside perspective and sounding board is a really, really great tactic to have. So thank you so much for sharing that one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, for accepting to be on this podcast episode. I really appreciate you. And thanks everyone for listening in today.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on People Potential with Amanda. I appreciate each and every single listen and view. If you've enjoyed this content, it would really mean the world if you could leave us a 5-star review. This will make a huge impact in increasing the visibility of this podcast, on top of brightening the day of a few people here at Success Finder who work really hard behind the scenes to make this all happen. We're continuously working on new episodes, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a thing. Until next time, stay curious.